French President Emmanuel Macron's speech at the United Nations addressed the global challenges facing the international community. He emphasized the importance of unity among nations in the fight for peace, freedom, and justice, mentioning historical alliances and current conflicts, such as the war in Ukraine and the situation in Gaza. Macron also advocated for the reform of the United Nations Security Council, calling for increased efficiency and broader representation. He highlighted the importance of protecting civilians and the need to end double standards in international politics. France is committed to continuing its work with partners to achieve lasting peace and stability.
Mr. President of the General Assembly, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government, ministers, ambassadors. I am speaking here on behalf of a country that will never forget what nations are capable of when they are united. Freedom, and France has just paid tribute this year to the peoples of America, Europe, Africa, Asia, and Oceania, who allowed it to free itself from the Nazi grip 8 decades ago. Progress is peace. Liberated, France has founded with its peoples a community of free and sovereign states, capable of committing themselves to each other, and agreeing on the essentials, and hope, like the one we have seen again lately. During the Olympic and Paralympic Games hosted this summer by France in the beauty, enthusiasm, and concord of the peoples. However, despite this jubilation, the Olympic truce, unanimously wanted here, has remained a dead letter. Yet the danger of ineffective speech and impotent diplomacy is there before us every day. However, our organization is facing the greatest crisis convergence that it is undoubtedly known after these 8 decades of existence. And the feeling of a loss of control is growing in the face of wars, climate change, increasing inequalities, injustices. And every day, humanity seems to fragment more, while circumstances would require to find common, strong, and effective answers. To restore these 2 words, United Nations, to their power of hope, we must find ourselves, as in the past, on an essential base. And that is what I would like to say a few words about. First and foremost, it is necessary to restore the terms of trust and respect between peoples. And I see them fading in the debates that are ours. To do this, we must indeed show equal attention to those who suffer. I mentioned it here 2 years ago, conjuring up the possibility of a double standard, one life equals one life. The protection of civilians is an imperative norm and must remain our compass. Even as we celebrate this year the 75th anniversary of the Geneva Conventions. And let's not let the idea settle for a moment that the dead of Ukraine are those of the North, that the dead of Gaza are those of the South, and that the dead of the conflicts in Sudan, in the Great Lakes region, or in Burma would be those of consciences who, too alone, would be indignant. Regaining control and restoring this trust, therefore, implies seeking peace everywhere, not accepting any difference whenever the dignity of human life is at stake, not accepting any difference whenever territorial integrity, the sovereignty of states, is at stake. These conflicts today question our very ability to enforce our Charter of the United Nations. And when I see some people who want to propose peace by asking for surrender, I am surprised that such an idea can even be supported. I want to reiterate here how indispensable the protection of civilians, of all humanitarian workers, of all those who work for our common values, is in each of these conflicts. Then, we need to make a common response to the great challenges that are the 2 wars that affect Europe and the Near East. Indeed, Russia is waging a war of territorial conquest in Ukraine. In defiance of the most fundamental principles of international life, she is guilty of serious breaches of law, ethics, honor itself. Nothing in this that it does not correspond to the common interest of nations, nor to the specific responsibilities that it assumes in this organization. The fate of Ukraine commits peace and security in Europe and in the world. For who will still be able to believe himself protected from his strongest, most violent, most greedy neighbors, if we let Russia prevail as if nothing had happened? Nobody. It is therefore in our common interest, the common interest of the nations, that Ukraine be restored as soon as possible, in its legitimate rights, and that a just and lasting peace be built. France will continue to do everything in its power to ensure that Ukraine holds on, gets out of danger, and gets justice. It will continue to provide it with essential equipment for its defense, and with its closest allies and partners. France will support the remarkable resistance of the Ukrainian people, and will commit to ensuring that they obtain lasting security. Let's seek peace. France will be able to join forces with that of all sincere partners to build a solid peace for Ukraine and for Europe. I know that, for many of you, however, the main thing is elsewhere, in the too long list of forgotten wars, unjust victories, poorly negotiated resolutions, or sometimes never implemented. I am not forgetting any of them, even if I cannot mention them all here. President Tshisekedi preceded me to this rostrum a few moments ago, and the situation of the Great Lakes, I will come back to it with him and President Kagame in a few days, concerns us. And in Armenia, Mr. Prime Minister, on whose side France stands firmly in the face of pressure from Azerbaijan and territorial tensions. The international community must be there for peace negotiations to succeed, and for internationally recognized borders to be preserved. But I know that, for many of you, the essential, beyond these wars, is also today, and it is also for us in Gaza, where the fate of the Palestinian people is present and weighs on each of our debates. On such a complex subject, I would like to reiterate with the greatest clarity the position of France since day one. We strongly condemn the terrible and unprecedented terrorist attack decided and carried out by Hamas against Israel on October 7. Terrorism is unacceptable, whatever the causes, and here we mourn the victims of the Hamas attack last October 7, including 48 French citizens. I send my thoughts of compassion, of friendship, to all the families who are living through the pain of having lost children, parents, friends of this October. We also ask again and solemnly that the hostages be released. Among them, many of our fellow French remain. And here I want to salute the efforts of the United States of America, Egypt, and Qatar to achieve this. This remains a priority for all of us. Israel, in the face of this terrorist attack, has the legitimate right to protect its own, and to deprive Hamas of the means to attack it again. And none of us would have suffered the blows received on October 7 without drawing consequences. So far, the war waged by Israel to the Gaza Strip had lasted too long. The tens of thousands of Palestinian civilian victims have no justification, no explanation. Too many innocent people have died, and we also mourn for them. And these deaths are also a scandal for humanity and a dangerous source of hatred, resentment, which threatens and which will threaten the security of all, including that of Israel tomorrow. It is therefore necessary that this war stops. It is that the ceasefire intervenes as soon as possible, at the same time that the hostages are freed and that humanitarian aid arrives massively in Gaza. We have been holding this position since October 2023, pushing resolutions with many of you, holding the first humanitarian conference for Gaza as early as November 2023 in Paris. Today, it is a question of political will in view of the destruction of Hamas military capabilities. It is imperative that a new phase opens in Gaza, that the weapons are silent, that the humanitarians return, that the civilian populations finally be protected. France will participate in any initiative that will save lives and ensure the safety of all. The deployment of an international mission must pave the way for the implementation of the two-state solution. It is up to the United Nations Security Council to decide in this regard. And the necessary measures must also be taken without further delay to preserve the link between Gaza and the West Bank, to restore the Palestinian Authority to its functions, and to ensure the reconstruction of the territory, and to make life possible again, quite simply. France will commit to ensuring that everything is done so that the Palestinians finally have a state living side by side with Israel. The conditions for a just and lasting peace are known. It remains to open the way, and it must be as short as possible. France will therefore draw the consequences of its commitment to the two-state solution and will renew its action, so that it finally comes to the benefit of the peoples to meet their legitimate aspirations, to bring about a Palestinian state, to give all the necessary guarantees to Israel for its security, to build mutual recognitions, and guarantees of common security for all in the region. We will work on this in the coming weeks, with Israelis and Palestinians as with all our regional and international partners. And in the immediate future, as we speak, the main risk is that of escalation. My fraternal thoughts are with Lebanon and the Lebanese people. Hezbollah has been taking the unbearable risk of dragging Lebanon into war for too long. Israel, for its part, cannot without consequences expand its operations in Lebanon. France demands that everyone respect their obligations along the blue line. We will therefore act to bring out an essential diplomatic channel in order to spare the civilian populations and prevent a regional explosion. There must not, there cannot be a war in Lebanon. That is why we strongly appeal. Israel has stopped the escalation in Lebanon, and Hezbollah has stopped firing towards Israel. We strongly call on all those who provide them with the means to stop doing so. We have requested that the Security Council be able to meet today for this purpose, and I welcome it. And the French minister will visit Lebanon this weekend. It is the same unity that we must show in the face of the great regional challenges and the global challenges that are ours. Because, beyond the conflicts that we are experiencing, and that I have just mentioned, we must together continue to ensure respect for each other's sovereignty, to build regional and international solutions to the challenges. This is the whole meaning of the relationship we want with Africa, a new partnership, and this is what, for the last 2 years, we have been working to do. France has done a lot in recent years for the African continent. It has done a lot in recent decades, but especially in the Sahel, where the French armies have successfully fought terrorism, side by side with their regional and international partners. However, the military coup in the region have led us to draw legitimate conclusions. But Europe and Africa have a common destiny ahead of them that requires a broad partnership, a partnership of peace and security, which presupposes renewing the terms, more training, more equipment, more mutual respect. Partnership also based on the economy, energy, sport, culture, memory. This is what, with Benin, Senegal, Cameroon, Algeria, Morocco, and many other countries, we have patiently built over the past few years, which we will continue to implement. It is the same philosophy that, for 6 years now, has led us to build an unprecedented partnership with the Indo-Pacific, where France's ambition is to contribute to respect for international law, without which there can be no prosperity. In this region, which has experienced an exceptional boom in recent decades, some are tempted to break the rules, or even impose their will by force. France is proposing an alternative, not for this substitute for anyone, but to give the states of the region the opportunity to choose their partners, project by project. The French territories of the Indo-Pacific have a unique expertise in the fight against climate change, the protection of biodiversity, the development of clean energies, or the fight against transnational threats, is our vocation in this regard in the region, and to cooperate more with all in their environment. As you have understood, this partnership logic is the one that aims to build new balances, to refuse the fragmentation of the world, or the old grammars, but to seek, with mutual respect, to build the paths of stability and peace. Beyond that, the challenge that is ours, hit by, obviously, the conflicts that I mentioned just now, would be to lose the thread of our multilateral agenda, to lose the effectiveness to which we are attached. And after experiencing the pandemic that reminded us so forcefully of the importance of some of these common challenges, to forget that we must continue this thread. I deeply believe that effective multilateralism has never been more necessary than today, and must lead to results in terms of development and the fight against inequalities, education, health, climate and biodiversity and technology. On each of these pillars, we need unity. And here, too, we need to do everything we can to avoid the divide between the North and the South. This is exactly the philosophy that we developed in the Paris Pact for People and the Planet, which more than 60 states have now joined. First, to ensure that we never push a state to choose between its objectives. Why would northern states teach southern states a lesson by explaining to them that they should respect the climate, and therefore give up economic opportunities? They should do what some of them in the North didn't do 20, 30, or 40 years ago. It is inadmissible and inaudible. We must therefore build an agenda that makes it possible, at the same time, to make progress in the fight against inequalities and economic development, for education, climate and biodiversity, and global health. Then, the solutions must be made and be based on proposals from the states themselves. This is what we have, for example, started to build our partnerships for just energy transitions. Not having a single solution for everyone or lessons given from our capitals where, in a way, we come to inspect countries, asking them all to follow the same recipe. There is a singular path for each country. This is the key to sovereignty. And then, there needs to be a public financial shock and additional private leverage. This is what allowed us, 3 years ago, to support and work to increase the IMF's special drawing rights, and to obtain the effective reallocation of nearly 100 billion special drawing rights, for the benefit of the countries that need them the most, especially in Africa. Silent but indispensable revolution. That is also why, on the strength of this pact, and we were with several of the members just now, under the effective authority of President Macky Sall and with the assistance of the United Nations, the OACT and the organizations concerned, we also want to continue this cycle of reforms and carry out a profound reform of the multilateral banks of our financial institutions. We have launched this goal of joint finance, bringing together development banks from all over the planet, including those whose agendas are not aligned. We must work on this joint financial agenda in order to be able to meet the objectives I mentioned. And together, I hope in the coming months, we need to thoroughly reform the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. First of all, to renew its members, these institutions having been conceived at a time when so many of you here were not independent. It is necessary to renew the capital structure, to give it more strength. The World Bank and the International Monetary Fund were conceived, thought out, calibrated at a time when the challenges were not the same. When the world economy was not that big, when demographics had nothing to do. We must lift the absurd taboos of the blockages sometimes posed by the greatest, which prevent others from handing over money for fear of being diluted. We need to give these institutions the capacity to act to finance the projects that the countries of the South need. And this reform is imperative for our collective credibility. And I say to the richest states, and to those who, alongside France, are around the table, decide not to do this, and you will see in the coming years an alternative order emerge. And there will be others who don't have your agenda. Decide not to do this, and you will be doomed hegemony, accused of cynicism, and maybe not wrongly. This reform of financial multilateralism is essential to meet these challenges. We must also pursue our agenda in terms of climate and biodiversity. The upcoming COPs are important meetings, and France will play its full role there, in particular by organizing with Costa Rica for the United Nations. This is an important meeting for the oceans. Nice, in fact, in June 2025, will host the United Nations Conference on the Ocean, and we will continue our work in doing so. And I hope that many of you will be able to ratify the achievements of recent months in this regard, in particular the indispensable Treaty on the Protection of the High Seas. And we will also continue to make progress on the issue of water, which is so essential, with the new One Planet Summit on water, alongside Kazakhstan and Saudi Arabia. I am not going to cover all the necessary, indispensable topics here, but I also want to remind you how artificial intelligence presupposes that, in our enclosure, all the states present here coordinate. We need to foster innovation. We need to make sure that the innovation of artificial intelligence will be accessible to all countries and peoples of the planet, and that it does not feed new fractures and new inequalities. But we need all this to develop in an ethical, democratic framework, thought out by the peoples of the planet and concerted. And we cannot let a few, let alone private actors who are now at the forefront of these innovations, think for us and for our peoples the future of it. That is why France will organize in February 2025 the next Action Summit for Artificial Intelligence. But, as you have understood, the objective is to build this common framework. And I welcome the work that has been led and coordinated by the Secretary General and the Global Digital Compact, built with the best experts who fully support this philosophy in which we are part. To finish my remarks, ladies and gentlemen, and being aware that I have forgotten so many difficult situations there, from Venezuela to the heart of Africa, and through so many oceanic tensions, I would like to conclude by speaking about our institutions. I hear a lot of voices being raised to say that, basically, the United Nations would have to be put in the trash. It's no use anymore. As you can see, we can't seem to resolve conflicts. Let us have constructive impatience in this matter. Let's be impatient. I have it with you. We can't be satisfied with not knowing how to sort things out. But let's be clear, the people responsible are there. As long as we have a Security Council that is blocked, I would say in a reciprocal way according to each other's interests, it will be difficult for us to move forward. Is there a better system? I don't believe so. And so let's just make these United Nations more effective, first by perhaps making them more representative. That is why France, and I repeat it here, is in favor of the Security Council being enlarged. Germany, Japan, India, Brazil should be permanent members, as well as two countries that Africa would designate to represent it. New elected members should also be admitted to its membership. But the reform of the composition of the Security Council alone would not be enough to make it effective. And so I hope that this reform will also make it possible to change the working methods, to limit the right of veto in the event of a mass crime, and to focus on the operational decisions that the maintenance of peace and international security require. This is what we must have the courage and audacity to do, and what we must carry with the current permanent members. Almost 25 years after the Millennium Summit, the time has come to regain effectiveness in order to act better on the ground. with states as well as civil society. And beyond the United Nations, we must open a new era in each of our multilateral institutions, as I have just mentioned. These, ladies and gentlemen, are the few words that I wanted to have here before you today. At a serious moment in our international order, where so many conflicts seem not to be resolved, I want to say that France will continue to try to take this demanding path, faithful to its values, which refuses the simplifications of the moment, and which will continue to fight for the simple principles that have always carried us: human dignity, respect for the principles of the Charter, and which, beyond conflicts and current events, has a vocation to continue to build with you a more just and more effective international order. Such will always be our singular voice, alongside our friends, our allies, but also free sometimes to say no. Sometimes to refuse the cynicism of the moment or the evidences that are not.
Le cynisme du moment ou les évidences qui n'en sont pas. Je vous remercie pour votre attention.
Thank you for your attention.